Hi, I'm Andre Faust. Continuing from part 1, Is Your Computer Dead?, where I demonstrated how to use a jumper wire on an ATX power supply connector to see whether or not the power supply was any good. I followed up the jumper test with a multimeter voltage test on each of the wires on the ATX connectors. In part 2, I will be showing what's involved in changing the CPU heatsink fan and the use of a power supply specific tester on both the existing power supply and the second known working power supply. Once the tests are completed, I will be connecting the second power supply to the motherboard and then perform additional tests. I have created these videos not for IT professionals but for newbies at fixing their machines. As in part 1, I will be discussing the rationale behind each stage of the diagnostic process and what to consider when replacing a part. In the conclusion, part 3, I will be going over the actual installation of a power supply and some additional tips. So, having said that, on to part 2.
Login accepted. Now initializing.
Okay, so we're picking up from where we were at the last time. If you recall, I did several tests. I did my power test. It failed. I did some volt readings and I got some strange readings, either no volts or the voltage didn't make sense. So now I do have my tester, and like I said, my conclusion was at the last time from the test that I did, this was a dead power supply. Okay. So here we go, moment of truth. Plug this in, turn power on, and nothing. It's a dead beast. This power pack is officially deceased. It's a goner. It's dead. It's a has-been. It's done and over with. It's had its day. So I looked around and I did find another ATX power pack. Oh boy, it's going to be a weightlifter to separate that line. So I pull that puppy up from the floor. I don't know what kind of shape this one here is in. It's a 600 watt that I happen to have. So okay, let's get the orientation. Okay, so I need power. Make sure it's off. And okay, now the fan on this is on the back side on the bottom, so I've got to put this up on its side. And let's take a look what we have here. Okay, so I'm going to do my first primitive test with my jumper. Okay, come here. I should get my old people glasses on. Let's see if I get it in the holes. Yeah, let's see if I get it in the hole. That sounds porno or something like that. So let's see what happens here. It is pulling in air. It's very quiet. The fan is running. I know that I have power. I'll shut this off. This particular power supply is a silent power supply. So okay, you can see that it has stopped. And I'll turn the power back on, and the fan kicks in. Shut it off, pull out my jumper. Like I said, that green wire, when I take my jumper and I go from this green wire here to the black or any of the blacks, it has the same effect as you pushing your power on button on your computer. So okay, so we're there, we're partway there. So let's put it on the tester and see what we have. Okay, now we have all 24 pins. Let's see what we get for a reading. Okay, I'm still getting minus 11.7 volts. 5 volts, and that minus, or not, not plus 9 volts. Well, that's and 3.3 volts is correct. Okay, so check the SATA. That was a pathetic sound, if you've ever heard a pathetic sound. So okay, we've found that it was a bad power supply, but there was something that I noticed. Also, I'll point out that as I was going through this machine, I did a thorough cleanup, removed all the dust on the fan blades and everything. But I noticed that this little problem right here, this broken fin. And I guess that bothered me. So today when I went to get the parts, I said, well, screw it. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And for the price of the fan, it was no biggie. So what we're going to do is pull this out now. You can see that I have no power going to the unit. Because there's always seems to be bad things that happen. Now, you know, one has to take very cautious, and we'll pull this puppy right out completely. Because it's like the thing is that with the I couldn't find a 4-pin fan. This is 70 millimeters by 15 millimeters, and they're just hard to come about. Now I've got to find some cleaner, because I got to remove this right here, because I'm going to be repasting this, and where it's a fresh paste, it won't be too difficult to remove. Now I've got to be careful at the same time that I don't get any of that paste on any of the board, because it is, I believe it is corrosive. Anyway, not good things happen if you get it up onto there. That looks nice and clean. So now comes this, and that's, it's a new heat sink, new fan, and it's already been pre-pasted. So before I jump right in, I'm going to take a look at where my connector is going to be at. And because if you don't think about it, you end up here, and if your connectors out to the board is here, that's not going to be good news. So this is always the trickier part, is to hope those things line up. And like, things have to fit, and you can't force anything. I'm just making sure that the thing's seated in there properly so I don't end up breaking anything. Okay, that's nice and secure. This is on my right side, so it will work with 3 pins. And always check that things are plugged in and tight before moving on. Okay, so that's there. So with the test power supply, I'm going to again take a quick step here and verify that things are working here, that are supposed to be working. Because I mean, I'm doing this on the fly. Good, that fan's come on, and we'll see that everything's in place. The fan on the graphic card is turning. The fan on the CPU is turning. And the exhaust fan, everything so far so good is working. The It didn't disturb the operating system. So now I'm just going to kind of wait for the operating system to come on. And anyway, so I can get a heat reading to double check that that thermal paste, that pre-thermal paste. Usually when I've gotten them in the past, the thermal paste, you had to do it manually. But still, that first stage that I did, that I cleaned off the top of the CPU chip, that had to be done. You don't mix, even though that was a new paste job that I did several days ago. Still, with the newer paste, I cleaned the old one, and that's a must, because that thermal paste increases the efficiency of the heat transfer from the CPU to the heat fins, and of course the fan dissipates the heat. And of course, when I did the cleanup, I took everything apart, but I had to make sure that this fan was oriented right, that it wasn't pulling in air this way here, countering what this fan is doing. So it is coming this way here, which is supposed to. So now that I've removed it, and then since I'm doing the work for a client, I always return the parts that I take out. So this belongs here, so that'll be going back to the owner of the computer, and they can decide however they want to dispose of it. And there's methods of the madness. One, you protect yourself. If there's any questions, like you rip them off or something like that, because unfortunately there are technicians that aren't prima facie up front. Thank God they're the exception rather than the norm. But it's good practice. So still waiting on Windows to do its thing. Do some final checks here before going on to the next step. Okay, so I'm looking at my information here. It tells me, everything is good. Recognizing the main board, memories, damn frequency, 609.6 megahertz. Looks good. Okay, tells us what our memory are. DDR3s, PC3, 10700, 7 megahertz, Kingston. Good, everything. And tells us our graphics card is all in order. Of course, it has to, because we've got it on the screen. So now I want to check temperature. Okay, everything looks good. CPU running. Actually, there's a difference between that broken fan, just that missing fin, about 2 degrees Celsius difference. So it's 29 Celsius. The motherboard's at 39 Celsius. Graphics card 31. All that looks good. Main board usually goes up a bit more than the rest, but unless you get up to 60, 70 degrees Celsius, things are pretty good. So okay, so we know that that's all good. This is off of the test power supply that I used, the one that I found laying around in the shop. So we're going to properly sign out. Power, shut down, restart. I just finished working with a Linux operating system there for a couple of weeks, and when I get back to Windows, I actually have to think about it. Okay, so I'll wait till everything shuts down. Now there's a reason why there's a lag between the shutdown from when I told it to shut down. And that's to allow things to cool down. Okay, so now it's shut off, and we're going to be replacing. Now we're going to be replacing the new power supply.
Session terminated. Initializing shutdown.